Greetings all, Ferrariman601 here. Today, rather than do my more traditional podcasts such as reviewing a Grand Prix or just talking about the state of Formula One in general, today what I would like to do is really just drum up some anticipation and excitement for what is absolutely going to be one of the most exciting racing weekends of recent memory. Of course, I am talking about what happens this coming Sunday with the Monaco Grand Prix, the Indy 500, and then over on the NASCAR side of life, we've got the Coke 600 over from North Carolina, the longest NASCAR race of the year. I don't really talk about NASCAR much, partially because I don't really know all that much about it, and partially because I don't really care to know all that much about it. But it's the longest race of the NASCAR year as well, so of course after a long day of racing, after having watched Monaco and Indy, it's never a bad idea to kick back and watch some NASCAR to end the day. In any event, this year, this wonderful race weekend, this Memorial Day weekend for us in the United States, it's a traditional day off on that Monday. This is going to be truly special, mostly because, of course, as all of us know at this point, the exploits of Fernando Alonso. At the start of April, Alonso announced that he was going to race at Indianapolis this year, and now just barely a month removed from that announcement, Alonso has absolutely set the world on fire on both sides of the Atlantic, putting in a great performance, relatively speaking, of course, at the Spanish Grand Prix, and then going over to Indianapolis, completing the rookie orientation test, and then through qualifying, putting together an absolutely stellar string of laps in that 4-lap qualifying formula that Indy has, and he has put himself 5th on the grid at Indianapolis in his first ever start in the IndyCar series, and of course his first ever run at Indianapolis in the famed 500-mile race. Fernando has been absolutely spectacular in every sense of the word. The team, Andretti Autosport, of course running under the guise of McLaren, but it's Andretti, let's be real. They have been absolutely complimentary of Alonso in every aspect of his demeanor, in every aspect of his approach, and looking at what Alonso has been able to do with regard to the stopwatch, I think he has really acclimated himself in an absolutely superb manner, adapting himself to the demands of oval racing, which in some aspects are fundamentally different from what he's used to over in Formula One, running on road courses, of course, but culminating in that 5th place qualifying position for the start of the Indy 500. Fernando Alonso, he is within a shot of being able to win the Indy 500 in his first ever attempt. No, I'm not saying that that's going to happen, but the fact that he's able to put that car 5th on the grid, Fernando Alonso, one of the finest drivers ever to race in Formula One, able to go across the pond, as it were, and then represent his talent so superbly in a completely different arena, on a completely new stage for him, that is truly indicative of the talent that Fernando Alonso possesses, and of course he is going to be contributing to one hell of a show for all of us who are with great interest going to be watching the Indy 500. Of course, first thing for the day is the Monaco Grand Prix. The other storyline, some people have said that it's not really a very significant storyline, but I do think otherwise. The storyline for Monaco is that replacing Fernando Alonso for this weekend, and this weekend only, is world champion Jenson Button. Of course, Button retired from Formula One at the end of 2016. McLaren have told him, hey, Mr. number 3/reserve driver, we've got a job for you for Monaco, since Alonso is otherwise engaged in the United States. So Jenson Button making a one-off return to Formula One for the Monaco Grand Prix. Button, of course, has not yet driven the MCL32, which is a very different car from the 2016 spec McLaren that, of course, he was very familiar with, given all of the technical regulation changes that have occurred over the winter. However, Button does seem to be rather confident in terms of his ability to adapt to the new car, as well as his confidence in the supposed upgrades that McLaren and Honda have made for this weekend. It's not really sure what those upgrades are. We haven't heard much, and of course McLaren are going to be tight-lipped about it, but Button, at least on the outside, sounds a little bit optimistic, I dare say too optimistic, about what his fortunes may be in Monaco. We have to remember that Jenson Button is, of course, a Monaco Grand Prix winner. He won the race in 2009 in his championship year with Braun GP, so he does know his way around this place, and I do believe Jenson Button has lived in Monaco for a while as well, so he's quite familiar with the atmosphere, and of course his long time in Formula One means that he's well prepared to deal with the demands of this Grand Prix. Aside from that, though, we have had Mark Webber out there trying to detract from the Button return story, saying it's not all that important and people should really just stop caring about it. But I disagree. Mr. Webber, himself a Monaco Grand Prix winner. However, I think it is good to see Jenson Button coming back, even though it is just for one race. Quite honestly, I never rated Jenson Button that highly as a driver. I tend to think that Jolyon Palmer rather has a lot more in common than perhaps we'd like to admit with Jenson Button. But Jenson Button, he is a world champion, and of course we have to respect that, and he is just an all-round good guy. So it is good to see Jenson Button coming back into Formula One, albeit just for one race. However, what all of this stuff means for us is that we have a long day on Sunday in front of the television for most of us. If some of you are going to be lucky enough to attend one of these races, have a great time and definitely do let us know what it's like. I would love someday to be able to get to the Monaco Grand Prix and the Indy 500. I don't really have any opportunities to do that for the moment, but someday it'll happen. But I will, of course, be glued to the television watching all of this, because really the Monaco Grand Prix and what it means for Formula One. Yeah, some people say, well, this track really shouldn't exist. It's too tight, the road's too narrow, you've got Armco barriers, you've got the prospect of launching yourself into the harbor if things go really pear-shaped. Sure, all of that's true, but the Monaco Grand Prix has been happening in some form or another since the 1920s, and it's just really the essence of motor racing. The Monaco Grand Prix circuit, basically the first permanent street circuit, if you want to call that. Of course, no street circuit is permanent, but the overall configuration of the track at Monaco really has not changed very much since the 1920s. That's basically out of necessity, because Monaco itself, the whole country, is only a little over 2 square miles in total area, so the roads are what they are. But the Monaco Grand Prix, it is the jewel in the Formula One crown. By distance, it is actually the shortest race on the Formula One calendar, although in laps it is the longest with 78 laps. And in time, it does tend to be a rather long race as well, simply because the track is necessarily slow because it is so tight. But it's an absolutely wonderful spectacle. The skill that the drivers have to display to be able to pilot these cars between those barriers, the top guys getting to within 3 or so inches of those barriers at the apices of some of the high-speed corners. Absolutely wonderful shots that we see of these cars going around the complex, around the swimming pool, la piscine, and then of course we have the famous La Rascasse corner going around the restaurant there, heading back onto the start-finish straight, they call it, but there's nothing straight about it. Of course, you got the great run through Saint-Devote and then up the hill toward Casino Square and the legendary tunnel. I can't wait to see these 2017 cars running around the Principality, because they are going to look oh so cool. Some people have raised some concerns about whether or not the 2017 cars are a little bit too wide for this circuit. To those people, I say you're absolutely crazy. Have a look through some race highlights or some full races if you've got them from the early 90s, when we've got the V12 and V10 cars that were ridiculously wide with ridiculously wide tires and big front wings. They managed to get around Monaco just fine, and there was even less runoff area through some of the corners back then, and the approach to Rascasse was, yeah, not so straight back then. Now you've got a straightened out approach to Rascasse, and you've got a little bit more runoff area around the Nouvelle Chicane just coming out of the tunnel there. So yeah, these cars are going to make it, and of course these drivers are supremely talented, so I don't have any worries about these cars being a little bit too wide for the streets of the Principality. What will be interesting to see, however, from a race tactical standpoint is Monaco is one of those places that is often regarded to be an equalizer in Formula One. If you've got a car that's down on engine power, it's not that important around this place because you really don't have any long straights. The highest speeds that we could expect these guys to achieve coming out of the tunnel, that's basically where the speed trap is going to be. That's the longest stretch on full throttle at any point around this circuit. We could expect speeds maybe getting to 285, 290 clicks. So if you've got a little bit of a straight line speed deficit, Monaco is your place to shine. I'm talking about teams like Williams and McLaren here, because yes, we do know that Williams, they don't have a straight line speed problem, but they've got a little bit of aero efficiency problem. There are no high-speed corners at Monaco, so if you've got good mechanical grip, that's about all you need at this place. McLaren, you've got a straight-line speed problem, you've got an engine power problem. Well, that's not that important around here. If you've got good traction, you've got good suspension geometry to be able to deal with those tight corners and negotiate your way around those barriers, you might be within a chance of doing something really good. So I would not really discount Van Dorn or Button here to do something a little bit special in that McLaren, even though we know that they have all sorts of problems on the engine side. Reliability for the McLarens, that still may be a concern. We do know that Fernando Alonso quite infamously blew up on his first lap of FP1 in Spain. However, with the reduced demand put on the power units around Monaco, simply because they're not going to be running at full throttle all that much over the course of a lap, perhaps that reliability issue will be quelled just a little bit, and we could see a little bit better performances from the McLarens. As for what we might be able to expect at the sharp end of the field, the traditional sharp end of the field, Ferrari and Mercedes, I think Mercedes might be in some trouble here. We know that Mercedes have the longest wheelbase of any team this year, and the bigger your car is, the less nimble it's going to be around these twisting streets. So Ferrari with a short wheelbase, and we do know that the Ferrari generally has been a little bit more drivable than the Mercedes this year so far. I think that we could see Ferrari in the pound seat for the Monaco race weekend. Of course, the first practice sessions in Monaco occur on Thursday. Friday is a traditional holiday in Monaco, and of course all of the public roads will need to be open because the Monegasque people want to go out and play. So yes, Thursday practice in Monaco. This is the only race weekend of the year where we make a slight alteration to the schedule and we hold our FP1 and FP2 sessions on Thursday. Saturday will follow suit per normal with FP3 and qualifying. Of course, Monaco is also the home to quite a number of support races, including some really cool historic races that I believe have already happened in some cases, if not all cases. A lot of people, a lot of very wealthy enthusiasts from all around the world, they bring some historic racing cars, many Formula One cars, to the Principality, and they stage basically a mock Grand Prix on the same streets as the Formula One guys will race on. So absolutely wonderful spectacle is the entire Monaco Grand Prix month for the most part. So of course, as a Formula One fan, I think all of us, we look forward to this because for me it's very much an aspect of Formula One coming home. This is an event that has been on the calendar every year since the start of the World Championship, and even beyond that, the start of the World Championship as we now know it, of course, the Monaco Grand Prix occurring in some form since the 1920s. So really, this is Formula One and motorsport in general paying homage to its heritage. It's the annual pilgrimage to Monaco. In many regards, it is where this grand spectacle all started. So the Monaco Grand Prix weekend, it is very special for all of us, no matter for what reason you look forward to it. I personally just love watching the cars operate around this circuit. It's not very often that we see them negotiating really tight corners with essentially no margin for error. It's a wonderful place to watch the cars work. It's a wonderful place to watch the drivers work. And because that course layout does lend itself into being a bit of an equalizer both with car capability and driver skill, you really do get to see who rises to the top both on the technical side and on the driver's side. So Monaco is a wonderful thing to see. Also, just another wonderful thing about Formula One is that it visits so many different places around the world over the course of the season. Monaco is one of those really unique places on Earth where you have a true melding of all sorts of different cultures. You have people in Monaco who natively speak Italian, or French, or Monegasque, or languages like Catalan, for example. So you have so many different cultures coming together, and in this little principality, which really goes back all the way to the Middle Ages, the Grimaldi family has controlled Monaco, I believe, since the 15th century. So Monaco is really, in and of itself, a relic of Europe's sort of city-state past. And the fact that it still exists and it's still a prosperous place to be, it is a wonderful thing to see also from a cultural standpoint. And of course, I mentioned all those languages that everybody in Monaco speaks to some extent. They all speak English as well, such is the state of affairs in the world today. So it is absolutely a wonderful thing to see, not only from a motorsports side, but in terms of the overall culture of Western civilization, Monaco. It really encompasses all sorts of different interests, all sorts of different things that people care about, and so many really cool things on the motorsport side that people want to see. So, of course, we're all very much looking forward to the Monaco Grand Prix. In addition to Monaco, of course, we've mentioned it, the Indy 500. I don't think there has been this much interest, at least in Europe, for the Indy 500 ever, to be entirely honest. I think perhaps when Mario Andretti was racing in the Indy 500, perhaps there was some interest there. Andretti, of course, a native of Italy. He later became a naturalized American citizen, but of course he probably carried a lot of that interest with him to Indianapolis, particularly during his days racing in Formula One, in which he won the 1978 World Championship. Fernando Alonso, he's not just a Formula One driver. He's a two-time world champion. And even though he hasn't been able to fight for the world championship for a long time, that's not his fault. It's because he just hasn't really made the best career decisions in terms of which team he's been driving for, and we all know the struggles that McLaren currently have. But Fernando Alonso, he's a two-time world champion, so he's not just another Formula One driver. He is one of the best Formula One drivers that we have ever seen. So for Alonso to be able to go now to Indianapolis and so far to do extremely well. I mean, the guys who are ahead of him on the grid are names like Takuma Sato, another former Formula One driver, Alexander Rossi, another former Formula One driver and last year's Indy 500 winner, Ed Carpenter, who is an Indy stalwart, he's been there for a long time, and then, of course, Scott Dixon being on the pole, Scott Dixon having won the Indy 500 a few times in his own right, and, of course, winning the IndyCar Championship a few times in his own right. The fact that those are the names in front of Fernando Alonso on this grid, that is just amazing that this guy was able to go over there sight unseen and then put the car fifth on the grid. The names behind Alonso, for example, we've got guys like Tony Kanaan. He's been in IndyCar for such a long time. Basically, he's achieved legendary status. Marco Andretti, of course, the grandson of Mario Andretti. Will Power. Will Power got out qualified by Fernando Alonso. Ryan Hunter-Reay. Ed Jones, Oriol Serbia. The list goes on. Graham Rahal, for example. Max Chilton, okay? None of these guys are slow. All of these guys know exactly what they're doing, and Fernando Alonso has already been able to beat them at their own game. Absolutely brilliant storyline for the Indy 500 as well, and of course it's going to be one hell of a spectacle for all of us. Not only because of, well, it's the Indy 500 and it is one of the most prestigious motor racing events of the year, it's really a very unique opportunity to be able to see one of Formula One's finest, who really has never stepped down from grace. Yes, it's been over 10 years since Fernando Alonso has been world champion, but he has been there as often as he possibly can since. He's been fighting for wins when possible. He's been fighting for championships when possible. He very nearly won it in 2007. He very nearly won it in 2010. And then, of course, the fortunes of Ferrari started to wane, and then he went back to McLaren, which, well, we all know where they are. But Fernando Alonso, he is still right there. So I think for Formula One, and for international motorsport in general, to be able to have somebody like Fernando Alonso being a representative there, showcasing the best of his abilities and making good on those abilities so far, it's something very unique, and it's something that we're all going to be watching with bated breath. In terms of what's going to be happening here regarding this weekend, of course, we are going to have a live stream of the Monaco Grand Prix, the live commentary stream, of course. There's no way that I can refuse to do this for Monaco. It is my favorite race of the year. For me, as a Formula One fan, it is basically my Formula One anniversary. The first race I ever consciously got up early in the morning to watch was the 2005 Monaco Grand Prix. So Monaco, yet another reason why it is a special race for me to see. And of course, it's Monaco. So we'll have a live commentary stream of the Monaco Grand Prix on Sunday. And then, yes, we will have live commentary of the Indy 500 shortly thereafter. I know I've never done any sort of commentary of any race other than Formula One, and I'm not entirely sure exactly how it's going to go because, yes, I do watch IndyCar, but I'm not as familiar with it as I am with Formula One, so perhaps we'll just have a live chat more or less, but of course we will be following the progress of Fernando Alonso throughout this race. It will be very exciting no matter what happens, simply because it is just such a spectacle amid some very unique circumstances. So I do hope to see many of you during those live commentary streams of both the Monaco Grand Prix and of the Indy 500. I certainly can't wait to see what happens. Until next time, though, thank you all very, very much for watching. I do very much appreciate your continued engagement and your continued support. Until next time, FerrariMan601 saying thank you very much, and we will see you soon.